Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are here with the recap for today's hearing in the United States versus Kelly, McDavid, and Brown. And you guys know how I do this. I've gathered live tweets from several reporters that are following the case in Chicago, and I am going to just read those tweets to you. And because they're live tweeting from the same case, some of it may sound repetitive, but every now and then you get a nugget from one that you didn't get from the other. And then before we get started into reading the live tweets, I want to share an article with you guys that came out in the Chicago Tribune, which pretty much wraps up basically what they live tweeted about. They then put it into an article. And so I am going to read this article to you, and then we will get into the live tweets. So it says R&B superstar R. Kelly had already been the target of several lawsuits alleging misconduct when he told his then business manager in December 2000 that his goddaughter was being harassed by police to admit they were having a relationship. So the business manager, Derrel McDavid, told a federal jury Wednesday that when he asked Kelly if the allegation regarding Rishona was true, the singer exploded. "Are you out of your goddamn mind?" McDavid testified. Kelly said, "At the time, this is my goddaughter. Of course there's no truth to this." So McDavid said Kelly was convinced that Rishona's aunt, Stephanie Sparkle Edwards, they just throwing Sparkle, they done threw you under the bus, they done backed up, they done caught you on a hanging, something hanging from underneath the truck, a hook, let's say the fish hook. They done hooked you, drug you down the street, let you fall off, and then backed up and rolled over you again. So, oh my goodness, Sparkle, they just exposing you, girl. So anyway, it said McDavid said Kelly was convinced that Rishona's aunt, Stephanie Sparkle Edwards, and his former personal manager, Barry Hankerson, who each had access to grind against Kelly, were behind it. Police later interviewed the goddaughter Rishona and her family, who denied it all, and no charges were ever brought, he said. And you guys know Derrel McDavid is Kelly's former business manager, and he is on trial with him as part of the government's case. And so it goes on to say it all added up in his mind that there was absolutely no truth to it, McDavid testified. Every statement, every report, every lawyer's letter all said the same thing. She denied it. Her parents denied it, he said. Asked what impact that had on Kelly's strenuous denials, McDavid paused. "I believed him," McDavid said. So McDavid's recounting of how the investigation into Kelly's relationship with Rishona is key to his defense against conspiracy charges, which hinges in part on his claim that he truly believed Kelly to be innocent at the time of the alleged cover-up, and that he merely followed the advice of more experienced attorneys and investigators. Earlier Wednesday, McDavid said that during his employment with Kelly, he came to believe that the slew of accusers who filed misconduct lawsuits against the singer were untruthful, just out for a payday from his famous employer. McDavid's testimony, which comes on the 15th day of trial at the Dirksen U.S. Courthouse, is a rare and risky move for a criminal defendant in federal court. Prosecutors are expected to cross-examine McDavid at length on Thursday. Dressed in a gray suit and light blue tie, McDavid, 61, was conversational and animated on direct examination, offering slight smiles and sometimes heavy sighs while describing the excitement and frustration of managing Kelly's meteoric rise to fame. So at one point, when describing how Kelly was rare, self-contained star who could do it all, McDavid gestured toward Kelly at the defense table, saying he could sit right there at that table and produce a song. McDavid said he also saw a darker side to Kelly's fame. The belief that the allegations against Kelly were BS stemmed from the very first public claim against Kelly, he said, which came from Tiffany Hawkins in the late 1990s. Hawkins sued Kelly, accusing him of having sexual contact with her when she was a certain age, and Kelly ultimately settled the suit for $250,000. But McDavid said that Hawkins' original claim alleged that he had impregnated her, which Kelly strenuously denied, saying he would take a paternity test. That claim was later dropped, which made McDavid suspicious that she was not being truthful, he testified. Kelly's attorney at the time, Derrel, said he would prove her a liar, but that they would still settle, which McDavid found confusing. But he would soon learn in the business that that's how stuff get done. Okay. Oh my goodness. He found it confusing, but this is the way it goes, Margolis told him, according to McDavid. McDavid scrunched his face in apparent disgust as he talked about women making stories up for a payday, at one point exhaling sharply and shaking his head as he described Hawkins in particular as on some kind of bullshit. Wow. McDavid had been slated to testify Tuesday, but the Dirksen U.S. courthouse unexpectedly closed due to an unspecified operational issue. The delay means that Kelly's trial will almost certainly stretch into next week. McDavid, who faces charges along with Kelly and Milton June Brown, is expected to testify that one of the tapes at the center of the indictment was in fact a video of Kelly and his then wife, not the CP that prosecutors have alleged. Wednesday marks the second day of defense witnesses. Kelly and Brown said last week that they do not plan to take the witness stand. McDavid, a certified public accountant, began by telling jurors about his first encounter with Kelly long before he became a superstar. He first heard about Kelly in the 1980s when a high school friend from Kenwood Academy walked into a card game and said he had just signed a group called R. Kelly and Public Announcement. It was a positive that Kelly was going to be a big player in the music industry, McDavid said, swiveling in his chair and sometimes pausing to sip from a bottle of water. A few years later, McDavid met with Kelly about becoming his accountant. The first words out of Robert's mouth was, "Have you heard my music?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He kind of looked down on the floor like he was a little bit disappointed, McDavid said. At that time, Kelly was introverted and humble, McDavid said. He was just trying to get in the music business and make it. But he warmed to McDavid during their first meeting. He testified, eventually asking, "So you the guy who's going to handle my money?" I said, "Yes." Child, he should have ran then. McDavid said. He smiled. And that was the extent of our conversation. In the years to come, Kelly became a bona fide superstar, McDavid said, and became self-contained. That is, he could write, play instruments, and produce, he said. McDavid recalled listening to a country music radio station with his wife, and in the middle of the country music, a song from Kelly's debut solo album, 12 Play, came on. On a country station, McDavid said. I glanced over to my wife and said, "Looks like he's made it." In the mid-1990s, McDavid transitioned from Kelly's accountant to his business manager, handling a wide scope of Kelly's dealings, anything to do with the finances, McDavid said. McDavid's testimony and the ensuing cross-examination promises to be lively. McDavid worked closely with Kelly for years before their professional relationship dissolved around 2013. But before jurors were brought in Wednesday morning, Judge Harry Linen-Weber ruled on two hot-button requests. The first involved journalist Jim Derrel, who Linen-Weber decided does not have to take the stand. That's right, you heard it, guys. He fell for Jim Derrel's BS story, okay, that he's a journalist and that he is protected by the First Amendment. Then Bongine had to later tell him that the reason he didn't have to testify had more to do with the Fifth Amendment, not the First Amendment. So they, that was on Twitter. Even though they had told her to stay off of Twitter, she be on there clapping back, okay. I think she just can't talk about the trial and testimony and that stuff, but she can still be on her Twitter account. And let's see. And then he had the audacity, the unmitigated gall to then get on Twitter trying to promote his book underneath the people that are live tweeting, the reporters that are live tweeting about the case. Then he gonna come on there with that raggedy book trying to promote and tell people about that book. Man, okay. Anyway. What else does it say? McDavid's attorney said they wanted to call Derrel strictly to cast doubt on the chain of custody for one of the tapes at issue, not to ask him about confidential sources or any other tricky topics. But Linen-Weber had already ruled weeks ago that chain of custody issues were not relevant, and so there was no basis to call Jim Derrel to testify, the judge said. Now, what is bothering me about this stupid judge is that he keeps saying that it's the same video, Somewhere along the way, he has missed the fact that it's not the same video, because the video that was in the 2008 trial and the video that was part of the grand jury testimony, they already told us that video was destroyed because you only have to keep records for 7 years. And somebody, I think they said the FBI, but some agency destroyed the video. Okay, so the video doesn't exist. And then we already know that the video was on a VHS tape, was originally recorded on a VHS tape. We know that VHS tape was stolen. We know that Lisa Van Allen mailed it to Kansas City to Keith Morrell. We already know that Keith made copies, cut the video all up, made copies. Those videos ended up on the street. We already know all of this, so we know it is not the original video. And just because it's the same scenes as the original video, you don't know if that video has been altered or tampered with in any way. And the case in point is what I mentioned before, where they are talking on the video, and people I have talked to who said that they bought the video when it came out in 2002, that you could barely hear the sound, that it was very muffled. But yet here we have a video where Kelly and Rashona are, supposedly clearly talking to each other about her age. And we know that came about after the jury in the 2008 case said that they couldn't prove how old she was on the video. Okay, so then Michael Albanati made sure that they knew, a age. But then the age that they're saying on the video doesn't align with Rashona's testimony, because she says that she was a different age. So it's just very perplexing that the judge is like hindering any opportunity for them to get before the jury, that although these people keep saying it's the same video, it's not the same video, because it's not the original video, and only the original video can be authenticated as being trustworthy, right? That hasn't been tampered with, hasn't been copied, hasn't lost its quality, hasn't had, any additions made to it. But Lennon Weber doesn't seem to be grasping that. Seems to be just going over his head. So I don't know how they are going to get this information in before the jury. And then even the lady from the, in the video that I shared with you guys last night, I think it was, or it might have been earlier today, even that lady said that at one point after the trial, that they have received like 234 copies of that video from around the country, where it has been turned into law enforcement, or law enforcement got a hold of it, and so they mailed it to that organization because they track that kind of stuff. And so we know that there are thousands of copies, and now it's in digital form online. People are saying that you can still watch the video on these different sites. And so for them to keep there saying that it's the, it's the same video, it's the, like everything, but we have authenticated that this is the original video, because we ain't heard that yet because it hasn't been. But anyway, Lennon Weber is slow, but I have to keep reminding myself he's 85 years old and really need to be spending time with his great-great-great-grandchildren. So then, on Tuesday, the eve of McDavid's expected testimony, Kelly defense attorneys filed paperwork asking the judge to prohibit McDavid from testifying about certain topics that they fear could unfairly prejudice the jury against Kelly, including any testimony related to McDavid taking Kelly to get injections or any treatment to curb his appetite. And I actually downloaded that document, and it was a long list of stuff that Bongine is like, you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't say this. So among the other matters that Kelly's attorneys hope to keep jurors from hearing, Kelly's marriage to Aaliyah, any lawsuits, settlements, or misconduct claims from other Kelly accusers, and testimony regarding Kelly's alleged sex addiction. Lennon Weber said Wednesday morning that he would rule individually on many of those possibly prejudicial subjects later on, but something like getting shots to control his sexual impulses would likely be off limits, he said. Now, I don't know when Lennon Weber planned on ruling, because McDavid took the stand today, so he already up on the witness stand. So basically, they could say whatever they want, and then he can, of course, go back and strike it, but the jury has already heard it. So Derrel got us earlier this week. I talked to you about him filing the paperwork about, he's a journalist and shouldn't have to testify. It says the motion filed by Derrel Goddess and his current employer, the New Yorker, alleges that by subpoenaing the longtime journalist to testify, attorneys for McDavid are trying to put his news gathering on trial. Derrel Goddess reporting on that tape helped break the investigation into Kelly's alleged misconduct wide open, leading to Kelly's indictment, the eventual acquittal. On charges in Cook County. Derrel Goddess was called to testify in that case, but asserted his First and Fifth Amendment right, and then did not answer questions. Okay, so they say the same videotape is one of several purported sex tapes at the center of Kelly's current trial at the Dirksen U.S. Courthouse, where Kelly, McDavid, and another former employee, Milton June Brown, are accused of conspiring to hide Kelly's misdeeds by buying back incriminating evidence and paying off or intimidating witnesses. Lawyers for the defendants have repeatedly tried to call into question the authenticity and chain of custody of the Derrel Goddess tape, in part because copies were made at the Sun-Times before one version was turned over to police. Last month, McDavid's attorneys also accused the former lead prosecutor on the case, Angel Kroll, of improperly communicating with Derrel Goddess in early 2019 using a burner email account, piper312@gmail.com, that was attached to a pseudonym, Demetrius Levinsky. According to prosecutors, Kroll had a short phone conversation with Derrel about possibly sharing the manuscript of his book, Soulless, the case against R. Kelly, then had a brief email exchange. She did not respond to subsequent emails or voicemails from Derrel, according to prosecutors, because child, don't nobody want that book. So Derrel previously told the Tribune that he was the one to initiate contact with federal prosecutors in an attempt to cultivate sources. That effort was unsuccessful, he said. Angel never gave me a damn thing. No federal prosecutor ever did, he said. Prosecutors abruptly rested their case in chief last week after calling only 4 out of the 5 Kelly accusers, whom jurors were expected to hear from. The prosecution case has featured other surprises as well, though it remains to be seen whether any will make a difference for the verdict. And then it says, defense attorneys for the 3 men called several witnesses Thursday before the case adjourned for the long weekend, including former Chicago police officer who provided security to Kelly's private investigator at McDavid's request, and an ex-employee, Kelly employee, who testified about the day-to-day functions of lower-rung employees. In addition to Derrel, defense attorneys have hinted they may try to call disgraced attorney Michael Avenatti, who represented a man who turned the 2 other tapes. Turned in the 2 other tapes included in the indictment over to federal authorities in 2019, as well as Kroll, who left Chicago in 2020 to care for an ailing relative and is no longer handling this case. All right, child. So now let's get into the live tweets. So we're going to start with Megan Crepeau. She says, but first, Judge Harry Lennon Weber is going to decide whether to throw out McDavid's summons calling Jim Derrel to testify. McDavid attorney Bo Brindley says it's all about the chain of custody issues. He doesn't want to question Derrel about sourcing. All he wants to do is have him examine the VHS tape in evidence to say whether it's the exact same one he received when he was at the Sun-Times. Judge Harry Lennon Weber rules that Derrel does not have to take the stand. Lennon Weber already ruled weeks ago that chain of custody for the tape is not at issue, since witnesses have vouched for the footage's authenticity. So I don't see any basis to call Mr. Derrel. And once again, Lennon Weber is totally missing the point. So Lennon Weber will rule later on about whether McDavid can testify about some of the more contentious topics that Kelly's attorneys want to bar. For now, he did say, though, that anything about getting shots to control sexual impulses is probably off limits. So the next witness is supposed to testify remotely from Nevada, but there is some kind of technical difficulty, and all we're hearing in the audio room is some kind of God-forsaken feedback. Sounds like a Tool song or alien techno mine. While that presumably gets sorted out, we're hearing instead from a Homeland Security investigations agent who testified last week. She's getting follow-up questions from Kelly attorney Jennifer Bonjean. Bonjean establishing that the HSI agent does not have documentation or an interview with Kelly accuser Tracy in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office original files. Tracy testified at this trial. She told prosecutors back then about some of the allegations she made on the stand. And that is Tracy Sampson, not me, different Tracy. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here? So this seems like a way for Kelly's attorneys to attack Tracy's credibility on this point without having to call any of the former Cook County prosecutors on the Friar Kelly case like they indicated they might. One of them is now a judge, so that would have been interesting. Now testifying from Nevada is Marta Johansson, who used to work with now deceased private investigator Jake Palladino. McDavid's attorneys want her to authenticate some business records from the time Palladino worked for Kelly. And just to stick a pin here, Jake Palladino was murdered last year at his home in February of 2021. He was leaving his house, getting ready to go somewhere, and these guys jumped him and beat him to death. And I don't think they were ever caught. And so Palladino is just one of two people who are close to Kelly and probably would have been testifying in this case had they not been murdered. And the other one was one of Kelly's attorneys named Linda Minchin. She was actually run over, backed up, and run over again. And although police have talked to the person who owned the van, the person said he was not driving the van, and I guess hadn't told them who was driving the van, or they told them and they pointed fingers at each other, but none of them have ever been arrested in her death. So I don't know if it's coincidental or not, but two people that would have been central to this case are now gone. And gone within, I think, the Jake guy was killed in February, and the Linda lady was killed in August of last year. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so she's there to authenticate some business records from the time Palladino worked for Kelly. McDavid's attorneys want the records in evidence to paint prosecution witness Charles Freeman in a negative light and try to show McDavid wasn't involved in some of these meetings. An invoice to McDavid from Palladino refers to a conference call regarding Freeman extortion, and in a list of Kansas City encounters apparently related to Freeman, McDavid's name is not mentioned. Palladino had a lot to say about Freeman that hasn't come up. In one memo, he referred to Freeman as a quote-unquote, a sleazy bottom feeder who whines endlessly, apparently out of the belief that being extremely annoying is a winning negotiating strategy. Well, dang, Jake. So on cross-examination, prosecutors noting that Kelly was a paying client whom Palladino would presumably want to keep happy, and that Johansson has no personal knowledge of what happened or who was present at any of these meetings, or if the information in the records is accurate. So next witness testifying for Kelly is Haley Koolbaugh, Coolbaugh. She is a paralegal working for Jennifer Bongine, Kelly's lead defense attorney. She examined the file for the civil suit Tracy filed against, and that's Tracy Sampson, filed against Kelly, which was about 440 pages long. So, and then they give a little background. Tracy filed suit against Kelly saying he assaulted her in 2000 when she was 17. Tracy took the stand during this trial and said that date was mistaken, and the assault actually began in 1999 when she was a year younger. So Coolbaugh says there were no phone records from 1999 in the civil suit file. But if the civil suit alleged misconduct in 2000, then the phone records from 1999 probably wouldn't have been subpoenaed at all, right? So we're on a short recess, after which Kelly's co-defendant and former business manager Derrel McDavid is expected to begin his testimony. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Your Honor, the defense calls Derrel McDavid. McDavid is the only one of the three co-defendants who is expected to testify on his own behalf. McDavid went to Kenwood Academy, which Kelly also attended, though I believe he was a few years behind McDavid, and eventually became a CPA. He's also involved in real estate and the restaurant business, he testifies. And y'all know, y'all say Darrell McDavid stole all Kelly money to buy that restaurant. That he was the one that actually paid for the restaurant, and then Darrell McDavid cut him out of the deal once he got the money from Kelly. So McDavid first heard about Kelly at a card game in the 80s. One of my old high school mates walked into the card party. He said he had just signed a group called R. Kelly and Public Announcement, and he was positive that R. Kelly was going to be a big player in the music industry. Later on, he met Kelly's then manager, Barry Hankerson, then Kelly, in hopes of becoming Kelly's accountant. So who was McDavid's friend? Because was that what's the guy's name? Wayne Williams? Is he referring to Wayne Williams? Or did Wayne Williams come along after Kelly left Public Announcement? You guys let me know in the comments. Let's see. So then he says, the first words out of Robert's mouth was, "Have you heard my music?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He kind of looked down on the floor like he was a little bit disappointed. McDavid: when I met Robert, he was a shy, introverted, I'm going to say kid for lack of a better word, humble. He was just trying to get in the music business and make it. Kelly warmed up to him after a while, McDavid said. "So you the guy who's going to handle my money?" I said yes. He smiled. That was the extent of our conversation. As Kelly became a bona fide superstar, McDavid went from being his accountant to his business manager, handling anything that had to do with money at all, cars, houses, etc. He'd say what he wanted. I tried to fit it into what he could afford. McDavid, attorney Bo Brindley: as he became more successful, how did your duties expand? McDavid: more money, more problems. He made more money. There were more things to acquire. There were more things to take care of. The houses got bigger, more expensive. Instead of one car, there would be 3 cars, 4 cars. Kelly and McDavid would almost get in fights when McDavid tried to keep tour costs in line. He always wanted everything, all of the fire, all of the spotlights and the big stages and the huge productions, and it was constant back and forth drama. Despite all of that, McDavid at one point considered Kelly like a son to him, he testified. As Kelly got more famous, he became less shy about women, McDavid says. He was flying a lot of women in and out of town, putting a lot of women in hotels. There was just a lot of women. Brindley: you're talking about adult women that you're aware of. McDavid: yes. To the best of my knowledge, yes. McDavid described friction in the 90s between Kelly and his former manager, Barry Hankerson. Hankerson's business was growing and he had less time for Kelly. Plus, less time for Kelly. Plus Hankerson. Of course, Hankerson was the uncle of Aaliyah, whom Kelly secretly married. That sure could have contributed to some kind of friction. Now that's Megan talking. That's not what was said in court. So jurors would not be hearing anything about Aaliyah, though, per the judge's orders. McDavid testifying about Tiffany Hawkins, the first person to make a public claim that Kelly had sexual contact with her when she was underage. McDavid says that Hawkins' first legal filings included a mention that Kelly had impregnated her, a claim Kelly strenuously denied and was later dropped. A lawsuit continued with the allegations that Kelly had sexual contact with her. McDavid said the way things started made him think Hawkins was some kind of excuse. My word, BS. It made me think nothing she said was true. Kelly's attorney told McDavid that he would prove her wrong, but they would still pay a settlement, which McDavid found confusing. The suit was in fact settled for $250,000. The whole experience made McDavid believe that any claims against a superstar like Kelly would be untrue, made by people who were just out for money, he said. The repeated lawsuits brought against Kelly after that were cookie cutter, McDavid said, making very similar claims and all coming from the same attorney, Susan Loggins. Kelly's attorney at the time also believed all these claims were BS, which bolstered McDavid's belief that none of these accusers were being truthful. So McDavid's defense partially centers on a claim that during the alleged cover-up, he honestly believed that Kelly was innocent. So that was the end. That was the end of Megan's coverage, and you guys know that she's in the overflow in the morning, and Jason Mesner is in the courtroom, and then after the afternoon break, they switch. And so now we have Jason Mesner picking up, and he says, Darrell McDavid has been animated on the witness stand, offering smiles and sometimes heavy sighs while describing his role as Kelly's business manager. McDavid pointed at Kelly when saying he could sit right there at this table and produce a song. Darrell McDavid is back on the witness stand, but we only got through 3 questions before we had an objection by prosecutors and now a sidebar. Okay, McDavid is likely going to be on the stand for 2 days at this pace. Brindley is asking, so Brindley is McDavid's attorney. So Brindley is asking about a January 2001 report by Jack Palladino about what Demetrius Smith was doing behind the scenes to try to get a girl to lie about being underage when she had sex with Kelly. Woo. So McDavid said it convinced him that the whole thing was a setup by Smith. McDavid: it made me sick because Demetrius and Robert were once friends. The fact that he would actually go out and get somebody to lie and then take a cut of the money was disgusting to me. Brindley, taking McDavid through another Palladino report containing an allegation that Barry Hankerson was offering $10,000 to another accuser to lie about sex with Kelly. It made me very nervous and scared. It convinced me that Barry was out to destroy Robert, McDavid says. Okay, and it says, McDavid says he had direct involvement in 2 accusations against Kelly. The first turned out to be lying. The second was bribed, he said. Based on what I had experienced at that time, there was no way I could believe anything that came forward could be true. In December 2000, Kelly told McDavid that his goddaughter was being harassed by police to admit they had a sexual relationship. When McDavid asks if it was true, Kelly allegedly says, "Are you out your goddamn mind? This is my goddaughter. Of course there's no truth to this." McDavid said Kelly was convinced Sparkle, Rishona's aunt, was behind it. At the time, had started working with Barry Hankerson, which made me believe it wasn't true, he says. Margolis whistled in Jack Palladino, who interviewed Rishona and her family, who denied it all. Brindley takes McDavid through the denials of Rishona and her family of an inappropriate relationship with Kelly, as well as the fact that police never brought any charges. Asked whether that had an impact on what Kelly had told him, McDavid says, "I believed him." McDavid asked about the Sun-Times reports on Rishona and Kelly. "I was disappointed that a news outlet would publish something that was obviously a lie in the newspaper. They weren't interested in the truth. They were just trying to sensationalize this to sell papers." 3 hours into direct examination, Brindley asked McDavid for the first time about one of the sex tapes at the center of the indictment. McDavid says in August 2001, Kelly called him and said Chuck Freeman was threatening to go to the media unless Rob paid him. McDavid says Palladino and Margolis decided to pay Freeman $140,000 to return the tape. Brinley, was there ever a point where Darrell McDavid told Chuck Freeman he was going to give him $1 million? And McDavid says no. So Brinley has a particular way of saying the phrase sex tape that is dripping with scorn and skepticism. The court reporter, The court reporter would need an emoji to capture it. Brinley is reading from a report by Jack Palladino describing Chuck Freeman as a slimy, untrusty Kansas City, Missouri street thug. David said the bottom line is we had to treat him like a criminal. McDavid says he asked Kelly if it was true that there was a tape out there of him and another woman. Kelly said, yep. Did he try to deny it? And he said no. He said that Margolis said they had to be very careful and get the tape back because even a rumor could destroy Kelly's career. McDavid describes Chuck Freeman as a low-level t-shirt guy. I wouldn't have hired him to shine my shoes. He was just a bad person with a bad vibe, McDavid says. Kelly, meanwhile, was on his way to being a superstar. So McDavid said he hired an off-duty Chicago Police Department officer as a bodyguard for Palladino because he didn't know what would happen in Kansas City. Jack didn't carry a gun. Chuck, I believed to be a criminal. I was not sure what he was capable of. I was a little scared at the time. So McDavid says that he didn't see anything illegal or improper about the plan to pay Freeman to get the tape back. He also says he never went to Kansas City to meet with Freeman, as Freeman has testified. McDavid said that Palladino called him in the middle of the night in August 2001 to tell him the tape had been obtained from Freeman. He said the tape was a copy. He could make out Mr. Kelly. The tape was of very poor quality. He couldn't tell who the woman on the tape was. So question, the tape that Jack obtained, was that a tape that involved any minor at all? McDavid, no. Question, did anyone reach out to a criminal defense attorney? McDavid, there was no crimes that I was aware of. There was no reason to hire a criminal lawyer. McDavid says he later became aware of lots of other tapes with Kelly on them. One was his bike-up dancer. Another tape, I believe, had his wife on it. Another tape had a famous baseball player's wife on it. And then there were some other tapes that were supposed to be fakes. Okay. So McDavid says that he asked Kelly if it was true that there was a sex tape out there. I think I may have. Okay, out there of him and another woman. Kelly said, yep. Did he try to deny it? No. He said that Margolis said they had to be very careful and get the tape back because even a rumor. Okay, I already read that. Low-level t-shirt. I would have hired him. I wouldn't hire him to shine my shoes. I wouldn't have hired him to shine my shoes. He was just a bad person. Okay, I think I copied and pasted that twice. So then it goes on to say Kelly, meanwhile, was on his way to being a superstar. Oh, excuse me. In December 2001, Kelly told McDavid there were rumors about a tape with him and Rishona. He says he knew Rishona as Kelly's goddaughter and had seen her at the recording studio. McDavid said Kelly came to him and arranged the purchase of a PT Cruiser for Rishona for her 16th birthday. McDavid said Kelly was angry. He was pissed off. He said he couldn't believe anybody would make up this kind of a rumor about his goddaughter. When asked if it was true, Kelly said, F you, this is my goddaughter. Don't ever question me about this again, according to McDavid. Oh, I forgot. When I read it before, I was reading Megan. Now I'm reading Jason Mesner. So yeah, it might be saying the same thing. Let's see. So it says, when told about the rumor about Rishona, Margolis said that Kelly should meet with the parents and also hire a criminal lawyer because now there was a particular issue about a specific person who was underage on a tape. We had to take that seriously. Enough was enough, McDavid said. McDavid says he set up the meeting with Kelly and Rishona and her family in the Oak Park Hotel, which Rishona and her mom previously testified about. He said Kelly was slightly apprehensive and angry about the situation. He was concerned about the family being hurt by the media. And then that's it for today, folks. Judge tells jury to be back at 10 a.m. Thursday for more testimony. I said testimony from McDavid. And let's see, after the jury leaves, prosecutors say, what should they tell the jury since the 4-week mark is approaching? Lennon Weber says there's not much we can do about it. It wasn't our fault. They closed the courthouse yesterday. Brindley says he's at most about halfway done. So then we move over to Dave Burns. And guys, remember, like some of this is going to sound very repetitive, but we're looking for those little pieces, those little nuggets that one person might post that the other person does not post. Okay, so it says court is back in session today in Kelly's federal trial in Chicago. Proceedings starting off with presiding judge Lennon Weber considering the motion by journalist Jim Derogatis and the New Yorker to quash the subpoena, ordering Derogatis to testify. Defense attorneys say they just want Derogatis to verify that the tape he received in 2002 is the same as in court here today. Defense says it's a small but important point that could help create reasonable doubt in the government's case. Derogatis and the New Yorker's attorney rebuts that calling the journalist to the stand would be discouraging further news gathering, the kind that leads to trials like this. Well, we need to discourage garbage that leads to trials like this because this trial should not be taking place. So Judge Lennon Weber grants Jim Derogatis' motion to quash this appearance in court today. He won't have to testify. I don't see any basis to call Mr. Derogatis, he says, saying the veracity of the tape and its custody chain can be established via other witnesses. So thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for the First Amendment, Derogatis' fat behind says. I shouldn't say fat behind, his greasy, disgusting behind says to Judge Lennon Weber after being excused from Kelly's federal trial in Chicago. So lawyers continue to argue over different motions prior to bringing the jury in. Defense are petitioning Lennon Weber to bar the prosecution for bringing up several lawsuits brought against Kelly, specifically a lawsuit brought by a woman named Tiffany Hawkins. Okay. So Kelly's lead defense attorney, Jennifer Bonjean, says the lawsuit would produce a mountain of prejudicial information, particularly as they contain information that could pit Kelly against his former manager and current co-defendant, Derrel McDavid. Lennon Weber says he'll rule on the individual lawsuits as they are brought up. Lennon Weber also grants a motion to release the passport of Kelly's co-defendant Milton Brown to Brown's attorney. He then calls for the jury to be brought in. Well, child, I guess Milton Brown need to make his way back to the Bahamas because based on that manifest that Customs, I think it was, the Customs officer presented, looked like Milton Brown spends quite a lot of time in Nassau, Bahamas. So the first witness for Kelly and co-defense case this morning is a woman named Marta Johansson, not sure of the spelling, appearing via video from Reno, Nevada. Technical problems are causing a delay getting Johansson on camera. Defense elects to proceed with another witness while those issues are addressed. Defense calls Amelia Molina, a federal agent who testified earlier in the trial, to re-examine her participation in Kelly's Illinois state trial proceedings from 2002 to 2008. Molina says that she knows of no documents in that case in which Kelly accuser Tracy testified that she participated in a threesome with another alleged victim, Roshana. This is Bunjin's only line of questioning, and now prosecution is up for cross. Federal prosecutor Jason Julian asked Molina if Tracy testified in a Cook County State's Attorney's interview in 2019. Bunjin objects, saying the focus of her direct questioning was only 2002 to 2008. Lennon Weber sustains and prosecution concludes cross-examination. That's all for Agent Molina. Next witness defense will call is Marta Johansson. Correct spelling, it turns out, from Reno, Nevada, again, now that the AV issues have been cleared up. So Johansson says, let me go back up here. Okay, Johansson says she is a former employee of Jack Palladino, a private investigator and attorney, now deceased, formerly in Kelly's employ. Johansson says that she worked for Palladino's company, Palladino and Sutherland, for over 40 years, from 1980 until last year, when Palladino was murdered. She says that she worked as an office admin there. I was answering phones. I was keeping track of the emails, she said. Johansson also says she helped maintain client files for Palladino, including the file for Kelly. Defense asked Johansson to look over several records presented to her, confirming their true and accurate copies of the originals. Defense brings her attention to one record specifically, an invoice. Before defense can proceed, prosecution calls for a sidebar. Sidebar concluded. Johansson explains that the invoice was sent from Palladino to Derrel McDavid in 2002 for services Palladino provided from August 2001 to July 2002. In August 2001, Palladino billed McDavid for several phone conferences. Other services specified in the invoices for August 23rd include traveling from Chicago to Kansas City, getting money, setting up a polygraph test, etc. Nowhere in that date's itinerary is Derrel McDavid mentioned. So prosecution up for cross-examination of Johansson. Prosecutor Julian asked if Johansson was loyal to Palladino and if she would say anything that could tarnish his reputation in court. Johansson agrees she was loyal to Palladino, but says there's nothing she could say in court that could damage his reputation. Julian posts that Palladino's job was to make his client look good, but Johansson rebuts that this job was to find the facts, even those that made his client look bad. Julian points out that Johansson's knowledge of what Palladino was up to on the August 2001 dates brought up by defense is based solely on her reading the invoice records. She agrees she has no first-hand knowledge of what occurred on those dates. So Julian again says that Palladino's work was client-driven, and so priority was to make clients happy. Johansson responds, of course, but adds that clients weren't always happy with the information Palladino provided them. Julian again tries to call Johansson's attention to a specific document, but defense objects for relevance. Lawyers meet for a sidebar to hash it out, and Lennon Weber sustains. For all of these reports of investigation, Mr. Palladino was charging someone money for writing these documents, Julian says. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, Johansson says, but clarifies that Kelly was definitely a paying client. Julian again pushes Johansson to admit that while she is knowledgeable of the documents Palladino made, she cannot be 100% certain that those documents were filled out truthfully or accurately. Johansson agrees. Julian concludes his cross-examination there. So defense is back up for redirect of Johansson. When asked, Johansson says that Palladino was always accurate and truthful when filling out his records. With that, Johansson is off the stand. So lead Kelly defense attorney Jennifer Bonjean now calling the next witness, a woman named Hallie Kuhlbaugh. She's a paralegal in Bonjean's office, in Bonjean's own law office. Kuhlbaugh said that discovery in this case was voluminous, consisting of thousands of records and other materials. Kuhlbaugh says that she was the first person to lay eyes on much of this material as she was organizing it for the attorney's use. Discussing phone records obtained by federal investigators in the civil lawsuit brought by Tracy against R. Kelly in 2001, Bonjean asked if there was a date range for the calls. There was. She says the earliest date was in May 2000, the latest in April 2001. That's all Bonjean has for Kuhlbaugh. On cross-examination, prosecution asked if Kuhlbaugh knows if Kelly ever spoke to Tracy in 1999, and she says she doesn't. Kuhlbaugh is off the stand, and Judge Lennon Weber calls for a 15-minute break in Kelly's federal trial in Chicago. So, the next witness on the stand for defense is Derrel McDavid, Kelly's former manager and current co-defendant. McDavid is accused of helping Kelly cover up his sex tapes with individuals for more than a decade. Questioning McDavid is his attorney, Bo Brindley. McDavid says he currently works as a certified public accountant and that he owns an accounting firm called Winkler McDavid. He says that he also owns a restaurant in Chicago and has worked in real estate. At the time McDavid met Kelly, he says he owned 6 or 7 properties and that his income was already substantial. Besides Kelly, McDavid says his accounting firm has represented the comedian Sinbad and filmmakers the Hughes brothers. McDavid said he first heard the name Kelly when he was playing cards at a friend's house in the late 1980s, when a friend walked in saying he just signed an artist called R. Kelly and that he thought Kelly was going to be big. McDavid said he began considering working for Kelly in 1990 or 91. When I met Robert, he was shy, introverted. I'm going to say kid for lack of a better word, McDavid says. McDavid says he began working as an accountant for Kelly the same day they met. At first, McDavid says he just kept Kelly's taxes in order and kept track of his expenses. He says the work picked up after Kelly's first album, Born into the 90s, was released. Now I'm hiring lawyers, I'm hiring insurance brokers, I'm hiring agents, other types of professionals, McDavid says. After Kelly's first solo album, 12 Play, dropped and sold over 200,000 copies, McDavid says he realized Kelly could be big. He recalls a moment when a 12 Play song came on the radio on a channel that normally played country music. McDavid says that Kelly was self-contained, that is multi-talented and able to write lyrics and music as well as play the involved instrument and sing. McDavid says he eventually transitioned from being Kelly's accountant to being his business manager, which involved extra responsibilities. You write checks, pay bills, make sure the cars are insured, those kind of things. He said Kelly would say what he wanted. I tried to fix it to what he could afford, McDavid continues. McDavid continuing to describe the responsibilities with Kelly, along with his management of Kelly's 4 major accounts for bass production, touring, publishing, and his home account, mortgage payments, personal expenses, etc. McDavid describes his ballooning responsibilities as Kelly's fame increased as more money, more problems. He says he almost got into fights with the singer over money because Kelly wanted everything. It was a constant back and forth. Okay. So despite this drama, McDavid says he grew close to Kelly, eventually considering him a son. But he adds that Kelly's personality changed over time. I knew Robert over time. R. Kelly existed. As he got into superstardom, he started to act like a superstar. Part of Kelly's character change after 1994, McDavid said, was his becoming increasingly forward with women. He was flying a lot of women in and out of town, putting a lot of women in hotels. There were just a lot of women, McDavid says. McDavid says that these women Kelly associated with were grown women, not underage, and that, like most superstars, his sleeping with multiple women didn't strike him as alarming. Kelly's behavior was no different than any other superstar, McDavid says. Let's see. So McDavid says that Kelly's growing fame was also creating tension with his former manager, Barry Hankerson. The more successful Robert got, the more attention he needed. McDavid says, adding that Hankerson didn't have any more attention to give. McDavid says that Kelly eventually fired Hankerson around 1999 after the pair got into a fight outside a restaurant. They had been arguing about the course of Kelly's career and who would be involved in it, and he says Hankerson eventually flipped the table. McDavid now getting into his hiring of attorney Jerry Margolis for Kelly around 1994. Now, child, that Barry Hankerson and Demetrius Smith is an interesting plot twist. Well, I mean, not a plot twist, because I think most of us knew that the rumors were out there. But to hear McDavid get on the stand and confirm that it's true is interesting. So let's see. McDavid says that Kelly eventually fired Hankerson around 1999 after the pair got into it. Okay, and Hankerson flipped the table. McDavid now getting into his hiring of attorney Jerry Margolis around 1994. McDavid says he hired Margolis because he was down to earth, as opposed to many show business lawyers who McDavid called stuck up. McDavid says that Kelly and Margolis clicked right away, and that Margolis eventually became McDavid's friend and mentor. He describes Margolis as one of the smartest people that I knew. He was obviously smarter than I was, and he was a good person. In 1997, McDavid says that Tiffany Hawkins sued Kelly for sexual misconduct, and that he found out from Margolis that Hawkins was pregnant with Kelly's child. McDavid says that Margolis planned to file an injunction to prevent news of this suit getting out to the media, and that he brought the Chicago lawyer John Toohey on to help Margolis with the case. McDavid says Toohey filed for the injunction only for the paternity claim to entirely disappear. Not soon after, McDavid says this told him the claim was untrue, as did Kelly offer to take a paternity test. So after the paternity claim was dropped and the suit changed to an allegation of Kelly having sex with Tiffany, McDavid says he stopped considering anything Tiffany said was true. He questions why she filed a lawsuit instead of going to the police. explaining why Kelly chose to settle the suit with Tiffany Hawkins for $250,000. Even a rumor of something like this getting out could hurt your client, even if it's not true, McDavid says. This was all just somebody trying to get paid. McDavid goes on to say that Hawkins' attorney, Susan Loggins, after Margolis questioned Hawkins, asked, "How much can I get?" McDavid says that Margolis offered Loggins $250,000 down from an initial $10 million claim. So McDavid reasons that if there was any truth to Hawkins' claim, Loggins wouldn't have settled for $250,000 when $10 million could be up for grabs. So McDavid goes on to say that Loggins eventually represented multiple women bringing sexual misconduct suits against Kelly, bringing a number of what he calls similar cookie-cutter lawsuits. McDavid describes Loggins putting up ads soliciting people to sue Kelly, which he describes as a feeding frenzy. Loggins' actions, he said, would further convince him that future lawsuits brought against Kelly were similarly untrue and best settled out of court. In comparison to what R. Kelly was making at the time, these payments were relatively insignificant, McDavid says. Other than the nuisance and expense, were these lawsuits something that worried you at the time? Brindley asked. No, McDavid answers, but adds that Margolis was afraid of false rumors getting out into the media. This led to the hiring of Jack Palladino. So McDavid says he met Palladino over dinner at Carmine's in Chicago. He was like a detective that you snatched out of a movie, he says, describing him as wearing a long coat and fedora and being extremely detail-oriented. So after McDavid begins, let's see. Okay, where was I at? So after, okay, afraid of the false rumors. McDavid says that Palladino, at Carmine's, he says, describing him as wearing a long coat and fedora. After McDavid begins briefly to get into interviews Palladino conducted on Kelly's behalf, Judge Lennon Weber calls for lunch. Court will resume at 2 p.m. Court now resuming in Kelly's federal trial in Chicago, and this is after the break. Kelly's former manager and current co-defendant, Darrell McDavid, is still on the stand, giving direct testimony to his defense attorney, Bo Brindley. So McDavid says that Palladino discovered that it was Demetrius Smith, Kelly's former tour manager, who introduced Tiffany Hawkins to her attorney, Susan Loggins. Kelly fired Smith prior to the Hawkins lawsuit, which McDavid says further convinced him that Hawkins' sexual abuse claims were untrue. McDavid also said he learned from Palladino that Demetrius Smith urged another woman in Florida to sue R. Kelly for underage contact, despite her stating that she was already of legal age when she had sex with him. So McDavid says that Palladino also discovered that Smith, while allegedly trying to get a woman to bring false sex abuse claims, was working for Kelly's former manager, Barry Hankerson. Hankerson, McDavid said, hated Kelly ever since Kelly fired him. So following, look, not that Kelly married his niece. He didn't hate him then. Oh, you gonna fire me? Oh yeah, I hate you for real right now. So following a December 2000 article in the Chicago Times detailing Kelly's alleged involvement with these individuals, McDavid says he became convinced that Barry was out to destroy Robert. He adds Hankerson believed Kelly owed him $1 million. So at this point, McDavid says he also became fearful that more and more people would come forward, bringing civil lawsuits, hoping to get settlement payments out of Kelly. He says it also further convinced him that the lawsuits coming against Kelly were unfounded. Based on the experience, what I knew at that time, there was no way I could think anything that came forward could be true, McDavid says. McDavid says that Kelly's attorneys at the time, Jerry Margolis, was very concerned that Smith and Hankerson were conspiring to ruin Kelly's career. So getting into Roshona's allegations that she was having sexual encounters with Kelly, McDavid said he confronted Kelly about it, asking if it was true. He says that Kelly responded, "Are you out of your goddamn mind? Of course it's not true." So McDavid says the blame for Roshona's allegations going public on that he blames Roshona's allegations going public on Stephanie Sparkle Edwards, whom he says hated Kelly after she and Kelly cut ties in 2000. McDavid says that Palladino's investigations into Roshona, which he went through in 2001, convinced him that there was no inappropriate relationship between Roshona and Kelly. So Roshona denied sleeping with Kelly as a minor, and they put that in parentheses, as a minor, to law enforcement, McDavid says, citing the report from Roshona's interview with DCF agents in 1999. Thus, let's see. This plus Palladino's own investigations and Roshona's repeated denial of improper sexual contact with Kelly to Chicago police in 2000, McDavid says further convinced him that there was nothing to it. So Brindley brings up that police investigators in 2000 asked Roshona if they knew Tiffany Hawkins. The reference to Hawkins, McDavid says, convinced him that Hankerson was involved. Nobody else knew about Tiffany Hawkins. How else could this come out, McDavid says. Brindley brings up the police investigators in 2000 based on Roshona, asked Roshona if they knew Tiffany Hawkins. Okay, Brindley also brought up that police reported in 2000 that they were receiving daily calls from a woman instructing them to investigate Kelly, which McDavid says he took as a sign that Sparkle was trying to stir things up. Sparkle had a vendetta not only against Roshona, but her family too, McDavid says he thought at the time. Brindley again trying to hammer home that in the late 1990s, early 2000s, McDavid had every reason to believe Kelly was innocent of the misconduct allegations against him, and every reason to believe outside actors were trying to defame him. So notably, Brindley has yet to ask if McDavid still believes the claims against Kelly are untrue. So Brindley brings up a letter from Roshona's attorney claiming that Roshona had fully cooperated with all the investigations into Kelly. The lawyer's letter contradicts a December 2000 article in the Chicago Sun-Times by Jim Derrel stating the police investigation into Kelly ended because Roshona would not cooperate. So McDavid says that he considered Derrel article to be sensationalist and showed him that he could put no stock in the Sun-Times reporting on Kelly. Judge Lyndon Weber excused Derrel from testifying this morning against the wishes of McDavid's attorneys. With that, Lyndon Weber calls for a 15-minute break in Kelly's federal trial in Chicago. And then David ended his live tweeting at this point and went on about his business to write his article for the day. Okay, so then the last person we have is Michael Tarm, And I don't really follow him that much because of the way he does his text messages is like very time consuming. And then he doesn't really talk a lot about anything. So he basically says Kelly hearing now taking place on whether Jim Derrel should testify. Kelly's judge says Derrel need not testify after, as a defense attorney said, they only wanted to answer one question, whether the physical video and evidence is the same one Derrel received anonymously in 2002 and gave the police. The judge said that would serve no purpose. Kelly judge cites an earlier ruling that neither prosecutors nor defense attorneys can bring up Kelly's ties to Aaliyah, the singer who died in a 2001 plane crash. So a defense attorney explained that questioning Derrel about the physical video he received anonymously in 2002 would have been geared to a chain of custody to raise reasonable doubts in the mind of jurors about the authenticity of the alleged video. Kelly co-defendant Derrel McDavid, Kelly's former manager, business manager, and accountant, has taken the witness stand. Kelly co-defendant McDavid on the stand now is charged with 4 counts of trial, 4 counts of something. Okay, CP, 1 of conspiracy to receive CP and 1 of conspiracy to obstruct justice, which alleges he plotted with Kelly to rig Kelly's 2008 trial. So Kelly co-defendant Derrel McDavid describes his first meeting Kelly in the 1990s. He described Kelly as shy, introverted, humble. He was just trying to get into the music business and make it. Kelly hired McDavid at the same meeting as his accountant. Kelly co-defendant McDavid tells jurors Kelly career boomed in the mid-1990s with the release of Soul Play. It sold over 200,000 in the first week, he said. McDavid testifies that Kelly was uniquely self-contained. To be self-contained means you have the ability to write the song, create the music, put the melodies together, play the instruments, everything. With the tools, he said, Kelly could do all of that right now in court. So asked how things changed as Kelly's career soared, co-defendant McDavid said, more money, more problems. The houses got bigger. Instead of 1 car, there'd be 3 or 4. So asked about how things changed. Okay. Kelly co-defendant, I'm so sleepy. Kelly co-defendant McDavid says Kelly, as he first knew him, was shy around women. As he entered superstardom, he started to act like most superstars. McDavid recalled Kelly in the late 1990s going to malls where women rushed to surround him. Robert embraced that. So former Kelly business manager Derrel McDavid tells jurors that Kelly is his popularity about Kelly as his popularity soared or soured. I think he meant soared, that he was flying in a lot of women in and out of town. There were just lots of women. After telling jurors Kelly was seeing lots of women, a defense attorney asked the Kelly co-defendant if he was referring to girls 13 and 14. No, McDavid responded, grown women. So the ex-Kelly business manager says he learned from an initial suit against Kelly that even though claims aren't true, there's pressure to settle. Even a rumor of something like this getting out could hurt your client. Even if it is not true, it's a cost of business, he said. McDavid also tells jurors payments of several $100,000 in settlement would be called false claims, weren't would be called false. Claims weren't major financial burdens. To settle what he called false. Okay, so he called them false claims. They weren't major financial burdens. In comparison to what Mr. Kelly was making at the time, these payments were relatively insignificant, he said. Kelly co-defendant keeps pointing at singer Sparkle for many of Kelly's legal troubles. She hated Robert, he told jurors, saying she and Kelly had a falling out and Kelly stopped working with her. She felt as if he destroyed her career. The risk for McDavid is the longer he testifies at the trial, the more doors he is flinging open for prosecutors to attack him once they get their shot, to cross-examine him. Issues they were barred from raising before, they can now raise after McDavid has touched on them. And he is making a really good point, and that's exactly what I was thinking. Like Darrell McDavid, he's sitting there telling this story under his own attorney examining him, but what happens when the prosecutors get up, and start throwing stuff at him? Like, is he going to be prepared to overlook their questions, or is he going to be given information that he doesn't need to be given had he not gotten on the witness stand? So it is going to be very interesting to see how this all pans out. And I am definitely looking forward to his testimony tomorrow. So guys, that's it for me. Go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.